Welcome back to a new episode of The Muddy York. I'm Grayson Miller.
And I'm Adam Weiser.
Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Actually, just before we started recording, I was at a book sale at Central Reference Library, always
Oh, nice.
trying to find new sources of information about Toronto's history. And one of the things I got, sort of an impulsive buy, was I found the treasury records for the city of Toronto for 1895. Now, I'm sure many of you listening at home are wondering, why on earth did I spend money on that? And if you look at the book, though, is City of Toronto bought some interesting things by our standards. Uh, People in the past had to spend money on stuff that we don't buy today, and cities did stuff back then we don't do now, and they didn't do a whole bunch of stuff that we do now. And my thought is that at some point in the future, we may actually do an episode just about the city budget for 1895. Just all of the stuff that they spent money on. And it's not like today where you have these vast numbers of employees, of purchases, buying, 20 tons of paper or what have you. They were actually listing every single employee that they were paying and what for. They were listing the individual quantities of cement that they bought. So just it's an interesting idea, something we might try to do in the future.
Toronto, if you didn't know, is a market city. It's home to more than 200 food initiatives and 100 public markets and neighborhoods across the city. Municipal markets such as St. Lawrence Market, Kensington Market, the Ontario Food Terminal Wholesale Market, and grassroots community markets in parks generate diverse benefits. City food markets are places where communities come together. They serve as gathering spaces, fostering social interaction and a sense of belonging. They bring together people from diverse backgrounds, creating opportunities for cultural exchanges and dialogue. By creating vibrant public spaces, food markets strengthen social ties and contribute to creating more equitable cities.
City markets do so much for great cities like Toronto. They provide urban residents with access to fresh, healthy, and affordable food, and they support local farmers in the process. City food markets often prioritize local farmers and producers, providing them with a platform to sell their products directly to consumers. This direct to consumer approach helps farmers bypass middlemen, retaining a larger share of their profits. By supporting local agriculture, food markets contribute to the sustainability of regional food systems, reduce food miles, and promote environmentally friendly practices. This emphasis on local sourcing also helps preserve cultural and culinary traditions, fostering a sense of community and pride.
Toronto, as we mentioned, has over 100 public market sites in the city. While most of them offer something special, there was one that has been the lifeblood of Toronto for over 220 years. It's a food market, but as you'll come to find out, it's much more. It's always been a strong communal hub, but it's also been a city hall, a jailhouse, a music hall, and a venue for political speeches. If you haven't guessed by now, we're talking about the St. Lawrence Market. Personally, I love the St. Lawrence Market. It truly brings me joy. Like, I love going down there. I love the smells, the sounds, the history. And as somebody that loves a good sandwich, the peameal bacon sandwiches, I just love them there. I love everything about it. And it also has a rich and storied history. Throughout the centuries, St. Lawrence Market has always been a cultural hotspot and was recognized by National Geographic and one of my favorites, the late great Anthony Bourdain, as one of the world's top 10 food markets. Adam, when was the last time you went to the St. Lawrence
I
Market?
actually went there for Doors Open Toronto back at the beginning of summer. As you already mentioned, the market building used to be Toronto City Hall, and I went to see the old city council chambers because they still exist. And just standing there, you can feel the ghosts of 19th century politicians stuffing ballot boxes and asking for bribes.
You're always so cynical. I go fairly regularly to the St. Lawrence Market. I mean, I think like at least a few times a month. I like to make like a little pilgrimage downtown and enjoy the delights that the market has to offer. The St. Lawrence Market is a major public market located along Front Street East and Jarvis Street in downtown Toronto. The formal description of the market states that the public market is made up of two sites adjacent to one another: St. Lawrence Market North and St. Lawrence Market South. The north building is on the northeast corner of Front Street and Jarvis Street. The south is situated south of Front Street and is nestled right above the Esplanade. If you don't live in the city, that can sound a little confusing. Adam, for our listeners who have never seen the main building, how would you describe it?
Well, it's an old brick building with a high central roof sloping down towards the wings. There are plenty of windows on all sides, so there's a lot of natural light in the interior. The market is on the main floor, and there are other shops on the floor below. There are also tables along the sides and the back of the building if you want to eat outdoors, though. If you want to do that, you've probably got about 6 weeks before it gets too cold, so better get a move on.
Yeah, I mean that patio situation that they have there is a truly delight in the summer. If you ever get a chance to do it, guys, go grab a sandwich, grab something from Buster's Seafood somewhere in there, and go chill out there. It's a great experience. It's really a beautiful building. I've been inside hundreds of times, and for whatever reason, I never really dove into its history. So I'm really excited to learn more.
Well, by 1803, York's governing bodies deemed it to be in the public's interest to provide accessible food and goods in a centralized location. Upper Canada's lieutenant governor established a weekly market day and designated a corridor of the city to house the market grounds. His proclamation appeared in the November 3rd, 1803 issue of the Upper Canada Gazette, saying, "Whereas great prejudice hath arisen to the inhabitants of the town and township of York, and of other adjoining townships from no place or day having been set apart for exposing publicly for sale, cattle, sheep, poultry, and other provisions, goods and merchandise brought by merchants, farmers, and others for the necessary supply of the town of York, know all men that I, Peter Hunter, Esquire, Lieutenant Governor of said province, do hereby ordain, erect, establish, and appoint a public open market to be held on Saturday in each and every week during the year within the said town of York, for the purpose of exposing for sale cattle, sheep, poultry, and other provisions, goods, and merchandise as aforesaid." Let me just add that I love the way that these old proclamations were written out, way better than press releases today. The first market in the designated area was known as Market Square and allowed people to gather on Saturdays from the corner of King Street and New Street, which is now Jarvis, all the way to Church Street in the west and Powell Street to the south, which is now Front Street. Market Square became one of the centers of life in York. This is where people would come together to see neighbors, purchase supplies, participate in auctions, and enjoy public punishments. While the public may have enjoyed the auctions and the public shaming, I can assure you that the people actually involved did not.
The Market Square operated weekly for decades. On a weird note, one of the reasons it was so popular was because in the early 1800s, town bylaws prohibited the selling of butter, eggs, fish, meat, poultry, and vegetables between the hours of 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Saturdays. The market was the sole exception. This was probably an effort to boost Market Square by giving it a monopoly on food sales for the most important shopping day of the week. So, if you lived in York in 1825 and you needed to make dinner for your family on Saturday and it slipped your mind and you forgot to go to your local general store on Friday, you had to go to the market. It was your only option. The first permanent building on the site was a wooden structure built in 1820. It was torn down in 1831 and replaced by a brick market building running from King Street to Front Street. In 1834, the town of York became the city of Toronto, and some of the first municipal offices were located in the market building. Interestingly enough, this is where Toronto's first bylaw was written, described as an act for the preventing and extinguishing of fires. It was passed on May 10, 1834. Intended to reduce the risk of fire in a city largely constructed of wood, the bylaw specified building requirements, regulated or prohibited hazardous activities such as the disposal of combustible materials, and defined the responsibilities of fire inspectors and wardens, fire companies, and citizens in preventing and fighting fires. You'll see why this was so important very soon. In 1834, Between 1834 and 1849, the market flourished, catering to Toronto residents and local public houses. Public houses still exist today and are some of my favorite places. It's where we get the term pub from, and they really haven't changed all that much. It's a place where people gather to consume alcoholic beverages and some food. In 1845, a fancy new building called the New Market House would be added on the south side of Front Street. This is the St. Lawrence Market building that we all know today. It housed meat purveyors, fruit stalls, and dry goods sellers. But it wasn't just a place for food, it was also City Hall and Police Station Number 1, with cells for prisoners in the basement. Apparently, the prisoners complained about flooding and the smell of discarded and rotten food. So, the cells were eventually removed and the prisoners were moved to the Don Jail.
The prisoners may have regretted that decision once they saw the Don jail.
Yeah, I know, I can imagine. But that smell, rotten food, water, underneath the city, I don't know. I feel like it would be horrible. And here's the callback, right? Or the callback to the first bylaw, because something big happened. Everything changed for the market in 1849 as Toronto was hit by bum bum bum, a great fire.
Now, Muddy York listeners should all be familiar with the Great Fire of 1849 because it was the subject of our very last episode. The short version is that it happened on the morning of April 7th, 1849, also known as the Cathedral Fire, because it destroyed an earlier version of St. James Cathedral. This was the first major fire in the history of Toronto. None of the buildings within the Old Market Square, which is about 10 to 15 acres of property, would survive the fire. The good news was that most businesses would return by the fall of 1849, and in 1850, a new market building, now known as the North Market, would be built on the north side of Front Street. It would continue to house the Saturday Farmers Market.
The rebuild of the market buildings would also include the new St. Lawrence Hall, which created a revival of culture in the city center. St. Lawrence Hall became an important social hub for the city, hosting concerts, exhibitions, lectures, and public meetings. It became the go-to place for performers and speakers of note. P.T. Barnum brought Jenny Lind, one of the most popular opera singers in the world, to St. Lawrence Hall as part of a world tour. Dwarf entertainer General Tom Thumb would also perform there. William Lyon Mackenzie and Johnny MacDonald would give speeches there. The great American orator and abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who himself escaped slavery, spoke against its evils in 1851. That same year, the North American Convention of Colored Freemen met on site for 3 days to discuss issues of slavery and black emigration from the United States.
But all good things must come to an end. St. Lawrence Hall's golden days tapered off in the 1890s. By 1895, Massey Hall had been built, and it quickly became the city's cultural hotspot. The hall was refurbished in 1967 to mark Canada's centenary and was designated as a National Historic Site. Today, if you want to check it out, it currently houses commercial and office tenants and space that can be rented out for special events like weddings or anything you like. The North Market has been rebuilt a number of times. It's currently closed for redevelopment. The Saturday Farmers Market and the Sunday Antiques Market continue at a temporary location at 125 the Esplanade. On the south side, various renovations and structural changes were made to the South Market during the late 1800s. The city's municipal government left the building in 1899 for the new City Hall at Bay and Queen Street, which we now call Old City Hall. Vendors took over the entire ground floor of the South Market building after it was re-engineered in 1904, and that's the layout that we all know today. Unfortunately, by the middle of the 20th century, the South Market was starting to deteriorate, and it looked a little dilapidated. If you know anything about our city, you know the people in charge love knocking down historically significant buildings, and the market only narrowly escaped demolition. In 1971, a planning board report and a consultant hired by the city recommended that the South Market be demolished. Thankfully, the citizens of Toronto were galvanized and persuaded the city to save the building.
By 1978, renovations were finished on the South Market, including a revamp of the basement, which now serves as a space for more vendors and is one of my favorite spaces. In total, there are more than 100,000 square feet of space featuring restaurants, food purveyors, and shops selling vintage goods and housewares. The St. Lawrence Market has stood the test of time and is truly a cultural gem to our city. In the words of Anthony Bourdain, you aren't a world class city unless you have a famous sandwich. New York has pastrami on rye, Montreal has smoked meat sandwiches, Philadelphia has the cheesesteak, Paris has the croque madame, and thanks to the St. Lawrence Market, Toronto has a peameal bacon on a bun. If this episode encourages you to visit the St. Lawrence Market, head to Carousel Bakery and get yourself a peameal bacon on a bun sandwich. A little mustard, and you're in heaven.
Thanks for listening to this episode. We're coming to the end of summer, so as things get colder, why not put on some headphones and listen to our podcast to learn about the history of Toronto? You can find us online on Twitter and Facebook. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. The more likes we get, the more subscribers we have, the higher the profile on those lists of podcasts that you get on Apple and Spotify, and hopefully the more people learn about it. If you tune in 2 weeks' time, you'll learn about the history of the building that's now called Meridian Hall, but which I always call O'Keefe Center because I'm old and I'm stubborn. So we hope to hear from you then.